Hi, it's Pete here. Today I am going to be reviewing the new Christopher Nolan war movie, Dunkirk, which has been out for a few weeks. I got to see it the other week, so I'm going to give my belated review for it. And to start off with, I have to say, going into this review, I'm a huge Christopher Nolan fan. Um, there are plenty of people who seem to think, and quite rightly so, it could be argued that the greatest filmmaker of all time is Steven Spielberg. And while I understand he has made some very, very good films, Steven Spielberg, and I love Steven Spielberg, for me, the greatest filmmaker of all time, if I was going to say one, it's all subjective, is Christopher Nolan. Simply because he hasn't made, in my opinion, a bad movie. And in fact, he hasn't ever even made just a decent movie. He's only ever made exceptionally good films. And so I was very excited about Dunkirk initially when I first heard about it, because the idea of him using his aesthetic and his talents to bring to a war film was really interesting. And also, I'm a huge fan of Interstellar, which was his previous film. For me, that's my favourite film of his that he's done. It just felt so original, so different, and so emotionally charged. It was fairly divisive, I realise, not everyone loved it, but I absolutely adored that film. So, to me, he hasn't made a bad film, and he hasn't even made a good film. He has made consistently amazing films that have been completely genre defining. Every single one of his films has been genre defining in some sort of a way. And I feel that this film is another one of those cases where he's just come into a genre and has just redefined it like that. Because war films, and I do love my war films as well, but since Saving Private Ryan, they've all sort of followed what Saving Private Ryan did, which at the time was extremely original, extremely new, and anyone who saw it at the time will know how visceral the first half hour of Saving Private Ryan was. And again, Spielberg did a brilliant job making it feel like such a realistic, gritty, gory, kind of grueling film, and he drained all the colour out of it. And it was brilliant. I mean, Saving Private Ryan was and still is an absolute classic and will always be considered brilliant, but it did set a trend of war films from then on. Not just war films, but stuff in general was going to be dark and gritty and grimy, and you sort of expected it of a war film after that. Before Saving Private Ryan, it had not been done to that level, to that amount of detail, to that extent. But since it, there's been so many other war films that have followed that basic template, which is it's extremely grueling, it's extremely gory, it's extremely like visceral. And what was excellent about this is nothing to not take anything away from Saving Private Ryan or those other war films. The way in which this was defining, or genre defining for me, was there was almost none of that. There was no shaky cam, there was no griminess, there was no gore. Yet he's managed to craft a war film that, in my opinion, was just as good, if not better, than Saving Private Ryan, and managed to make you feel in the moment, and it was tense, and you felt the threat of danger, and you felt that these soldiers were going to get killed and could easily get killed. And the fact that he did that with a 12A rating was showing very little gore, in fact no gore, none of the stuff that war films usually lean on to kind of, I won't say manipulate the audience, but they normally lean on these kind of very visceral, gory things to make you sort of shocked. This film didn't do any of that, and it was an absolute testament to just how good of a filmmaker he is, that he could make a film that's this riveting and this intense. It's such an intense movie, and yet you don't see handycam, you don't see limbs flying off, you don't see people exploding. It's just such a genius film. I mean, there are some negatives with it. The negative mainly being that you don't really connect on an emotional level to the characters just because of the way the movie is. The movie is just literally covering the event of Dunkirk, which was the evacuation of all these soldiers from Dunkirk when they'd been hemmed in by the Nazis and they were stuck at Dunkirk and they had no way of getting home. And normal people, usual people, people who weren't even soldiers, people who were just on boats from this country went over and rescued, I think it was 300,000 of these guys, risking their own lives in the process. And it was one of the incredible stories of the war. And I think that, again, if you're going to tell a war story, especially a true one, it's good to anchor it on something that was a hopeful aspect or something that you can focus on, because it's such a grim, horrible subject matter. A war film is always difficult to take on just on face value because so much bad stuff happened. It's like the Schindler's List, you've got to sort of focus right down on one particular thing that has an element of hope and an aspect of survival to it. And that's the other thing about this film, is it's not about a victory, it's not about the good guys beating the bad guys. It's just about survival. The characters that you're watching surviving this horrific thing, and it really puts you in the moment with these guys. Like you feel for them just because you can see the intensity of what's going on, and the fact that you again, it's not a really deep emotional connection like you would get in another film because you don't have any of the setup. The film is literally just, it's almost like a third act is the whole film. Like if you're going to do another movie, like say for example Pearl Harbor, which was dreadful by the way, had about an hour and a half of meandering, terrible like character setup, which was just a complete waste of time, and it was the right way to do the movie, but it was rubbish because Michael Bay can't direct actors and can't write dialogue, doesn't understand characters or romance or decent storytelling. So the Pearl Harbor aspect of that movie, the actual act of Pearl Harbor, was really, really good. And I always said, me and my friend always said at the time, that if the whole film had just started with Pearl Harbor and just focused on Pearl Harbor and not bothered with the hour and a half of character building because it was absolute garbage, the film would have been brilliant. It would have been like a brilliant war film, because that 40, 50 minutes is just the Pearl Harbor time. It was really well done because Michael Bay can do action quite well, so it was very well done. And we both said this should have been the movie. This should have been like the whole movie, this one thing. And this is what Dunkirk is. It is the event without any of the character build, without setting up characters, without spending that time. And the genius thing is, even though you don't get emotionally connected to the characters, you get emotionally connected to the situation. And there was a moment in this film, which I'm not going to spoil because I hate doing this, but it brought tears to my eyes, and I was emotionally moved in a really, really powerful way. A, because it was a true story and this has actually happened. We know that these people did this stuff. But B, because you just become so in the situation with these guys. You see them getting bombed, you see them getting on boats and the boats sinking and then having to swim back to land and then having to wait to go out again and then getting shot at, and you just feel that these guys need a break, they need help. And that's the genius thing, is just how he manages to make you care about the situation without any of his character development, without being able to, you know, take a moment aside and set up some characters. And it's very, very original because there's hardly any dialogue in the movie. There really is very, very little. I mean, Tom Hardy's in it. A lot of big name actors are in it, but a lot of small name actors in it as well. In fact, those people tend to get more of screen time. Obviously, there is dialogue scenes, there is some downtime. I think that the good thing as well is it's well paced in terms of it covers the whole event, and the whole event is very tense, but it's not constant action. Because if you had a film just constant action explosions for 2 hours, it would just become numbing and you wouldn't be able to put up with it and you would just overload your brain. He very, very cleverly sort of builds up to key moments that are extremely explosive and extremely tense, and then has a little bit of downtime. But even within the bits of downtime, the tension is still there. The whole thing feels like one big tense experience. And I don't think anyone's ever quite managed to make a war film this well in terms of putting you in a situation, making you feel like you're one of these people who's experiencing it. So for me, it is very, very good. It's a 9 out of 10. It isn't a 10 because of, like I say, there is a little bit of aspect of a little bit more background or characterization would have helped you invest in the individual characters a bit more. But like I say, in a way, it can hardly take as much of a criticism, considering that the whole point of the film was just to cover the event of Dunkirk. And I don't know if for people who are familiar with the history, it does give you a little bit of a background on it at the start. But I think it's definitely a film that if you know the history, you know what actually happened, you're going to be in a better position to maybe get more out of it than someone who doesn't know any of the history and isn't aware of that. But then again, you could say the other, because some people who are so entrenched in the reality of it, if it differs from one little tiny thing, will be up in arms and be saying how it's a load of rubbish. And obviously, the film will take creative license with certain things. Um, but in terms of the direction, it's staggeringly good. In terms of the acting and the character performances are in the movie, it's brilliant. Mark Rylance is really good. But like I say, the thing that stands out is not really the individual characters or the performance. It's just the movie itself, the way it is helmed, the way it's directed, the way it's been put together, and the way it makes you feel. I always think for me, Christopher Nolan, it's a very, very emotional director. I think people don't tend to disagree with that, but I tend to think that his films all hit emotions really, really hard, especially the last few films he's made. And I think he's just getting better and better. Some people think this is his best. I'm not going to agree. I still think for me, Interstellar is his best because that was above and beyond the most original film. Not that he's done, but that probably any filmmaker I know has done since, say, 2001. Whereas this, although it is a very original war film, in a lot of ways, it's still a war film. It's still, you've seen these kind of things in some movies before, but it's just not been told this way before. Now, I may be wrong about that. There may be some random war film out there I've not seen that does this same idea much better, but I can only talk from my experience of the films I've seen and the war movies I've seen. So for me, I would say this is the best war movie since Saving Private Ryan. Too soon to say whether I think it's a better film in general than Saving Private Ryan, because it's only just come out. I'd have to sit in it, watch it another 3 times, and have a think. I also wonder if maybe this is the kind of film that on a first watch is infinitely better than on rewatch. I don't know if it would have the same rewatch value having watched it once. Again, I haven't seen it twice yet, so I can't really say. But I can say 9 out of 10, if you haven't seen it, it's definitely worth heading out and going to see. Not for children at all. Despite 12A, this isn't a film you should take any kids to, really. But I think that it's, even if you're not into war films, I think it's the kind of thing that will get you into, it will pull you into the movie, because again, it's not really about the war, it's about the survival, and you get so immersed in it that any kind of genre can work if it's about survival. If you look at films like The Martian and Gravity, like sci-fi films, that maybe not everyone is into sci-fi, but people really love those movies and can engage with them because it's about survival and it's about, surviving against the odds, whether it's in space, whether it's on a battlefield or whatever. So yeah, I would put it right up there with the best war films and say it's definitely worth checking out. So that's my review for Dunkirk done. I will finally be getting around to doing my Iron Man review soon. I keep saying I'm going to do it, but I will finally be reviewing Iron Man and all the other Marvel movies. I might do other films in between, depending on what I get to see and what I've got on the Blu-ray collection I think I want to go into. I've been tempted to go into the old Planet of the Apes movies after just doing the new ones, but for now I'm going to focus, I think, on just these Marvel movies, because there's a ton of them. There's about 15 of them or something, so it's going to take a while to get through all them. So that's my rant done for today. I will see you guys soon. Thanks very much for watching.